voice of Dave Richardson. Good morning, Dave.
Thunder. Apologies for being late on parade. It was actually because I was down in the garages just advising the teams and the crews with regards to what tyres to use. Like they needed any help with that decision, Nico.
I guess that is Captain Obvious Deluxe today, if you ask about tyre choices. Mohamed Hamdi knows, everybody knows. No, I mean, it's really been wet, wet, wet since the early morning hours, and the track is soaked, the curbs are soaked, the runoff area, the AstroTurf, everything is really wet, and that will certainly have an influence of what the drivers can do in terms of exploiting the limits of the circuit, because where otherwise they would run very wide and take the curbs and the runoff areas. Now, in these conditions, probably the drivers will stick to the grey stuff.
You can see Szymon Ladniak there preparing, and also preparing down there with all the wet weather gear on, because poor old Ludovica, she's got to be out there in the rain, you know. You and I have got this lovely air-conditioned studio where we have service on demand and room service, and poor old Ludovica down there. I'm feeling for you this morning. Good morning, Ludo.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Nico, and welcome to this rainy pit. All the Ferrari 488 Challenge Evo are lined up in the box, and in a few minutes they go out for the second qualifying session of the weekend here at Spielberg. It's raining from yesterday, and for Trofeo Pirelli this is the first qualifying session under these wet conditions. So all the teams decided to put on the wet tires for this morning.
Yes, I think they're probably making the right choice, the wet weather tyres, of course, as we look at the number one depicted on the car of one Mr. Franz Engstler. There, as we look through the garages, the Formula Racing garage there with Stefano Guy to the left-hand side of the picture there with his headphones on. He, of course, very successful GT racer and Ferrari Challenge racer in years gone by. He now very much sort of a driver coach, team manager role that he occupies. And there you can see the queue of cars ready to get out there on track. And right at the head of the queue, Nico, is the star of the show at the moment, one Mr. Alessio Donno. Absolutely.
Very dominant performance yesterday as he took the win, and took it with quite some margin, as we see final preparation here in the garage of Formula Racing.
Andreas Berg Sorensen there, who you and I first met when he made his debut in the Ferrari Challenge in the Winter Series, Nico, in weather conditions which was somewhat different for part of the period that we were there. Ironically, we were in the Middle East for the Winter Series, which was, of course, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where, lo and behold, because of the influence Nico and I have on the European weather, we took that European weather to the Middle East with us, and blow me down, it rained in Dubai. I mean, it just doesn't happen, does it?
Well, crowded house-like, we took the weather with us. And coming to Dubai, it was pouring down to the extent that they pushed the entire event back a full day, because flooded circuit is not something that... I mean, those Ferrari 488 Challenge Evos are great machinery, but they're no power boats.
But forgive me, it was not so severe as in another event that I was there for, where pit crews literally were jet skiing up and down the pit lane. I mean, come on, come on.
It's rare, but it does rain, and well, it's not as rare here in Spielberg. We've seen snowfall for the Ferrari Challenge in May in previous years. No snowfall predicted for today. Weather is not perfect, but is adequate for racing. There is Adrian Sutil, who had a very interesting and entertaining race yesterday.
I thought he was brilliant.
Was turned around in an incident with Hanno Laskowski in turn one of the first lap, and then sliced through the opponents, or past them rather, and made up a number of positions, quite a big number. However, was also hit with a track limit penalty for 5 seconds, and that dropped him down a little bit. I venture to say track limits less of an issue today, probably because of the
agree.
conditions. Drivers will, as we said, keep it on the grey stuff more because where the track is slippery, those curbs become an extra challenge deluxe.
I have to say, during one of the Copa-Shell race yesterday, of course we are talking to Trofeo Pirelli and the guys are out there qualifying at the moment, but the moment when von Skeltermeyer and Christian Kinch were side by side going through turn number 1, and it really reinforced what you'd been saying about how the painted surfaces become ever more slippery as Von's car just launched itself sideways as the grip went from 5% to -10%. How they held onto those cars was remarkable, a feat of their driving skills and standards. So we saw some incredible driving standards from Adrian Sutil yesterday, who got turned around right at the start of the race, as Nico alluded to, and then cut through the pack to make his way back up again. It was a brilliant drive from Adrian Sutil, and we look forward to seeing what he can do today. He's out there qualifying at the moment, as indeed a number of Pirelli and Pirelli AM drivers, a small number, it has to be said, venturing out in the early stages of this qualifying session in the rather rain-affected track. So Sutil was, in my opinion, something of a star yesterday, and let's see what Ludo has to say about Adrian Sutil right now.
Yes, Dave, you were talking about Sutil, and yesterday after the race he received by the race direction 5 seconds of penalty, but the drivers after the race go in the race direction for talking about this penalty, because he don't make track limits, but just he lost the control of the car, and for this reason he, for just few seconds, he exit from the track, but it wasn't track limits.
Okay, well, we just saw that in replay, what happened yesterday. Thanks, Ludo. And I did, funnily enough, I was having a conversation with Adrian Sutil after the race as he was making his way up to race control, I suspect, on his way to make his point, as it were. And I'm sure he did quite fiercely. But he's a very talented driver, there is no doubt, with lots and lots of Formula One and other single-seater experience. But it's almost tempting to say that he has fallen into the Ferrari challenge like a duck to water, and how appropriate that little expression is today, and Nico, because duck-like he is making his way around the track right now. The first time that we've seen on the board is from Benz Valent, who had a good race yesterday, Nico. It's a 1:46.099, and we have 25.5 minutes of the session remaining. Here is Mr. N. Spalek.
Absolutely. Obviously, we were not going to bore you with yesterday's quali times because they have no effect and no benchmark value for this session. Given that yesterday's qualifying was firmly in the dry, this is very firmly in the wet, and I don't know if duck-like is the right expression for the speed the drivers have even in these conditions. We just hope that they're not going to be albatross-like in some instances, losing the grip. And
Albatross.
It's an albatrosity in that case, but Adrian Sutil is not going to improve on the overall time, but he puts his car on P3 for the time being. Benz Valent, as you said, P1, Eliseo Dono P2, but he's on a trajectory to take that P1 position away from Benz, and when he crosses the timing line, let's see if we can time that to the second, which apparently we don't, so I have to stretch that sentence for a number of minutes. So Eliseo, please come and rescue me from that. He's still not there. Anyway, let's go to something else, and I'm sure he will finish his lap and be P1. There you go. It's a 1:44.406. Thank you. Benz Valent crosses the timing line and takes that away. 1:43.670. Over to you, Dave.
The song analogies that Nico was going on about, and rescue me, of course, from Fontella Bass, and indeed they did rescue him. And talking of ducks, as we were, and I hope you'll forgive us for being just a little bit lyrical with today's qualifying, Disco Duck, which was a huge hit for Rick Dees and his cast of idiots going back many, many years. Rick Dees, of course, a famed USA broadcaster. Back to the script, Dave. We're with Adrian Sutil, who has done personal bests in Sector 1 and Sector 2. Benz Valent is improving still further. He is the best driver so far, with a 1:43.670, which I have to say in these conditions is actually very, very creditable. Alicia Dono P2, Tom Fleming is P3. Now, Philippe Pret, who he'll forgive me for saying so, one of the older Ferrari Challenge drivers, or should I say one of the drivers with the most experience in Ferrari Challenge, having raced in Europe, in Italy, and also in Asia Pacific as well. He is the best of the AM drivers at the moment. But Benz Valent then is hoping for an improvement with his time, and indeed, certainly from a sector point of view, is something like 2/100ths up on his previous best time, as we just see Alicia Dono. But here is Benz Valent then. A 1:43.670 was his previous best time. Let's see if he can eclipse that now. He's got one more turn to do here on the Spielberg circuit, where we're about 2 hours south of Vienna. He heads to break the timing beam now. And he doesn't do it. It's a 1:43.804. You know what it's like, Nico, where you build something and build something and build something, and then, like a damp squib, it's not there at the end, and that's precisely what Benz did for us.
Well, you're just describing my cooking attempts every single day.
Heaven forbid.
Totally.
What this man can do with a slice of bread and an egg is known to no man.
Yeah, talking about albatrosities. Adrian Sutil again with a good first sector. Benz Valent also showing purple on our timing screen. Now, obviously, in the wet, with the wet weather tires, tire degradation is a little bit less of a topic, especially when it's so wet as it is right now, where the tires really don't go off like the slicks do and have a very short peak operational window. That's less of a topic here. Adrian Sutil is going for that time. He's currently P2, but he's certainly on a trajectory to take away that P1, at least momentarily, from Benz Valent, but he's ready to respond, also showing purple after the first sector. And indeed, Adrian Sutil a full second, 1.1 seconds, a 1:42.565, so good showing from him, as we have all 18 cars out on the track, and that means the track is very busy. And not only is track space an issue, but also, as you can see, visibility becoming a little bit of an issue for the drivers as they come up to the other cars ahead of them, trying to find track space and a clean lap. Benz Valent taking that final turn, and now let's see how we can back time it. A 1:42.565. Benz Valent takes it with a 1:42.127. 4.5 tenths.
Well done, you, coming up with all that broadcasting terminology now. Let's see how I can back time it. Very well done. We'll make a presenter of you yet. Into the garages we go, and all the data being analysed, discussions going on about strategy. Strategy is just keep within the white lines. So say the Emil Frey racing team. Have we seen a time yet from Franz Engstler? Yes, we have, and it's not really meaningful, so better to come, I suspect, from Franz Engstler. And also for Hanno Laskowski. Hanno Laskowski, of course, who actually broke Franz Engstler's unbeaten run of success yesterday, with Hanno Laskowski on the top step of the podium, Nico.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has taken P1 in class for the time being with a 1:43.553. You can see him with the white background on our timing chart to the left-hand side. White background means he's an M driver. Red background means they are Pirelli drivers. And
Adrian Sutil goes P1, Nico. But by a big, big margin. 5.5 tenths. That's very creditable. Well done, Adrian.
Absolutely, and times are coming down. Alicia O'Donnell, who we generally see come out, put in a quick one, go back into the pit lane, hasn't quite done it. Obviously, we still got 19 minutes of this qualifying session remaining.
19.
Indeed.
Minutes.
And there is number 85 on your program, number 1 in our hearts and our timing screen in class, Hanno Laskowski. Dark blue and yellow livery works really, really well.
We were in the Emil Frey garage just a moment ago, and it's brilliant actually to welcome the Emil Frey team into the Ferrari Challenge. Well-respected and well-regarded team, and engineering a great car for Emil Frey. So much so, Nico, that he is now Sector 1, Sector 2 quicker than anybody else out there. So the track is really beginning to come to these drivers. And that's basically the wet weather tyres getting into their really good operational window. Whoa, just a little bit of a wobble there for Hanno Laskowski, but if he can make the final sector purple as well, this will be a time that may trouble Benz Valint, but not quite. I did wonder whether we might see an AM driver actually vault the Pirelli drivers, but it wasn't quite that quick. Of course, the times you see on the graphics are relative in class, you should always bear in mind. And here's Benz Valint then, who is seemingly responding to his own brilliant time, and how much of that is down to the fact that he knows that Adrian Sutil and Alessio Dono, and also Tom Fleming, who's just gone quicker than Alessio Dono, are also responding to what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously the drivers will maximize their track time because they haven't had these specific conditions yet this weekend. It's been very variable over the last few days, including the tests on Thursday and Friday, but you know, every little bit of experience helps, and therefore the lap time is one part, having the extra experience is another, and having a better time still is a third one, a 1:40.754. Tom Fleming trying to come on terms with him, not quite there on this occasion, but you know, it's much better to have a slower initial lap and then get to the levels of adhesion and grip from that side, rather than trying to be too aggressive early, bin it, be in the gravel and not being able to continue. So you'd rather be careful and get closer to the edge rather than coming over the edge and then trying to recover from that. Don't
be too gung-ho, I think is what you were trying to say. And take your time and do it right. And that's what Benz Valint has been doing. But there you can see a new set of weather tyres going on to the Alessio Dono car. I wonder, Nico, with 16.5 minutes of the session remaining, Danilo Del Favaro just being given advice by his driver coach there, just wonder to venture whether we might see 7/10ths taken out of the times before the end of the session, and we might actually get a time into the 1:39s. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but we will see. And you know, one of those drivers that could do that is this man, Benz Valint. We were also just looking at Alessio Dono, another driver that could potentially do that. I haven't mentioned this yet, and I think I should, but a good big up to James Owen, who is the second quickest of the AM drivers at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. Very good showing from him thus far, and Benz Valint, I think, will at least get very close to that 1:40 mark. Not quite there, but half the gap from his previous time to that magical benchmark. And I do think the answer to your question is probably going to be yes, unless the rain picks up again and therefore makes it more difficult and result in more standing water on the circuit. But otherwise, I think there is a very good chance that the drivers will find that line and grip level to get to the 139 high. Max Magelli is trying and is getting closer, certainly on trajectory for a personal improvement, and P5 becomes P4 in class, but he's still quite a bit away from the benchmark. Is 3.6 seconds. So
fair point you make, and always with fair points. Down in the pit lane, in the wet and the murk and the mire, is Ludovica.
Yes, Dave, I want to give you an important update for the track because after the modification and the changes about the design of this circuit, in case of hard rain, the drivers pay attention about the turns 1 and 3, because there the track and the asphalt is poorly draining. So there is a risk of aquaplaning forever of the drivers.
Thanks so much, Ludo. So turns 1 and 3 are the aquaplaning hotspots.
Yeah, and I think to give you a little bit more context, just recently they added that chicane for the motorbikes between turns 1 and 3, so in the uphill section.
Is that it's just before the kink, which is turn number 2, isn't it?
Exactly, but as part of that, they resurfaced that first sector effectively, first sector plus, and therefore those are the areas where the track behaves differently than previous visits and records would indicate, and therefore that is the reason. And Benz Valint has come closer, 1:40.092, so scratching at that 1:39.999 mark. And
yes, just 9/100ths away from that. And here's Alessio Dono. He's installing at the moment. Whilst this is still a very good lap, this is not the one. He'll be hoping the next one will be the one, I would suggest, because we saw him with the new boots going on, the new Pirelli wet weather rubber. And as he crosses the timing line now, he delivers a 1:43.303. This is the lap that I would expect Alessio Dono now to perhaps trouble that Benz Valent time. Perhaps we will stay with Alessio Dono as he heads up now, and you can just see the start of that new chicane, or you could, that Nico was talking about on the left-hand side as we look at Armin Arifpour right now, the Riller and Schnaut driver, with another one of the stunning liveries which adorn the 488 Challenge Evos. And as you can see, that's just how tricky the conditions are. Armin Arifpour then with a high-speed slide and a complete 360, I suspect, before he gets the car pointing in the right direction once again. And we have a red flag, Nico. I don't know whether that's as a consequence of the Armin Arifpour situation that we just saw, but it's really royally ruined Franz Engstler's go, because he'd set a faster than anyone in his class sector time for Sector 1, and the session has been suspended with the red flag. And that, I think, we're on board with the Adrian Sutil car. You can see the spray being kicked up from underneath the 488 Challenge Evo. And the session now has been suspended with a red flag.
indeed, and that obviously will bring everybody back into pit lane. And with 12.5 minutes, that just advantages those who were in the pit lane right now anyway. And it's a huge disadvantage for everybody who was just coming out, like Franz Engstler, who was on a flying lap. Also, what this will do, depending on how long this intermission will be, all the standing water that has been dissipated by the cars running across it is going to amass again, and the aquaplaning topic might be one again. But for the moment, we have a moment to go down to the pit lane. Ludovica, please.
Yes, Nico, while a lot of cars re-enter on the pit, I'm here with the team of Benz Valent, that in this moment is the poleman. And for Benz, this is the first qualification session in this wet condition.
Yes, it is, but he's doing really great. Benz is really fast on the rain. We are the fastest car on the track so far, so let's see the last 12 minutes, and then we hope to keep this pole position.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Andrea there from the Rosso Corsa team, talking to Ludo, and of course extolling the virtues of Benz Valent, who is doing a very, very good job out there and has done. And here's Alessio Dono. Now, Alessio is another one that was compromised by that red flag coming out when it was, because we'd seen him do his installation lap, and he, of course, is back into the pit lane now with another set of wets going on to the Alessio Dono car. Wheel gun being used there, as you can see. The Pirelli wet weather's going on. The team's working hard here so that when the suspension comes to a close of this session, that Alessio is going to be able to go back out again. So at the moment it is Benz Valent who is the quickest Pirelli driver. For Pirelli Am, it's this man, David Gosner, who is top of the chart. lovely images there of the cars making their way through this wet track. As we look at Tom Fleming, young Thomas is currently second fastest. He's about 1.2 seconds down on Bens Valent. So work to do for the FF Corsa team and Tom Fleming out there in these challenging conditions. There you can see the big torque wrench being used just to make sure that the massive wheel nuts are done to the correct torquing pressure. There's David Gostner discussing his efforts, and his efforts have been pretty good because he's P1 for Trofeo Pirelli. And to his right-hand side is Manuela Gostner, and right behind him is his father, Thomas Gostner. Of course, it's a four-strong entry from the Gostner family in the Ferrari Challenge across both Trofeo Pirelli and Copachel, and there was Corinna Gostner in there as well. So basically what they're doing here, Nico, as you can see, they're looking at the track, and David is just reporting back for the benefit of others that will be out qualifying in Copachel a little bit later on, where they can push and where they can't push, and what sectors and what corners are particularly suspect in these weather conditions. So that information being passed on. And that's pretty useful, isn't it? Because David Gostner has been out there as a researcher almost for Corinna and for Manuela and for Thomas when they go out a little bit later on. Meantime, the cars are queuing up in the pit lane. At the moment, we have no information as to when the session will recommence, Nico.
Indeed, we're still waiting for that information. Hope it's not going to be too long. Obviously, let's take this moment as we saw the Gostner family to wish everybody, all the mothers, particularly a good Mother's Day today. And it's just 10 seconds away is the restart of this session, so we're just about to go back qualifying, and that means in 2 seconds red will turn to green, and we are back qualifying, and that means the first car to leave pit lane is Franz Engstler, eager to get down the road, up the road, through the mist, through the spray, through the wet conditions, and try and wrestle that provisional pole position in the AMS from David Gostner, and everybody else also filing out of pit lane to do something about their current position. The only one who's quite happy with where he is, or very happy with where he is, with nowhere to go further up, is Bens Valent.
You're absolutely right. His time of 1:40.092. So we now have 12 minutes left on the clock for the drivers to try and find not only space on the track, but also improvement in conditions. And I'm not sure from the angles that we can look at, and we have availability of a number of screens here in our studio as to whether it is still raining, and I think it is. And there is Franz Engstler showing that sideways is beautiful, particularly when it's a 488 Challenge Evo. It's not always necessarily the quickest way around the turn, but it's very, very entertaining for us. He is currently second fastest in Trofeo Pirelli AM, and you can see, I mean, the old master there, Nico, takes me back to the days of him doing that in other machinery around Hockenheim and places like that. Franz certainly knows how to drive, doesn't he? And these conditions, Nico, won't phase an old hand like Franz.
No, absolutely not. But he, like everybody else, will have to readjust to the track conditions, because the last 10 minutes or so with no cars running across it means that
it's not dissipating anything.
Standing water is reappearing where it had dissipated previously, and I think the scenes which we love to see, he maybe didn't quite enjoy as much inside the car.
Fair point.
But you know, that is something that water has to dissipate again, and all but 2 cars are out on the track. And I mean, Arif Paul, we just saw walking away from the track as one of the 2 drivers currently not running, the other being David Gostner, who we saw talking to the family. And, you know, David may decide, you know, the risk reward in this is just not worth it. I'm P1 for the moment, even if I drop 1 or 2 or 3 positions.
He's not going out again, is he?
He may decide to do that, but we still got 10 minutes, so plenty of time. Franz Engstler may give us on this lap a first indication of what is possible. First sector, 7/10 down on the previous best time in class. And there is one more look at that moment, which was a bit sideways. Just a bit.
He just loves throwing a car around, doesn't he? And he does it, makes it look like a piece of art. Well done, Franz. As you say, he's some time down on previous best times, which will be indicative, I think, of the point that you made that during the non-running, during the session suspension, of course, that water had time to accumulate on the track, and therefore we do have standing water in places where previously there wasn't. So it will take a bit of running from various cars that are out there at the moment to move that water aside, and that will perhaps give the tarmac the opportunity to offer the drivers perhaps a quicker lap time before we get to the end of the 9 minutes that remain in this qualifying session, as Franz Engstler rounds out a further lap, and we'll go for another one. Of course, traffic is going to be a problem as we look at Tom Fleming now, and Tom up against some traffic ahead of him, which will compromise his efforts now as he gets past that car. And he will use this as something of an installation lap. He's into the final sector of the track, and then he will go once again. At the moment, he is second fastest, but by some measure down on Benz Valent. And of course, with the red flag and the stoppage, the track conditions have changed somewhat, and therefore it might be a tall order and a big ask to expect him to get closer to that time that Benz Valent, of course, set earlier on in the session, Nico.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good entry to talking about drivers who are out of position, and certainly Eliseo Dono in P8 overall is one that this list has to include and probably has to start with. P8 for him, P5 in class, is absolutely not where he is used to start. That would make for a very interesting race for us, because he would have to come through from that position, but he's still got 7.5 minutes plus 1 lap to do something about that position. He is trying, he's out there. For the moment, not an improvement yet, but certainly he's going to go for it. Tom Fleming in P2, certainly much better positioned. Benz Valent, obviously. Adrian Sutil, P3. Simon Lerniak, P7. Those are the top 5 Pirelli drivers. In the AMS, we already said David Gostner, P1. Franz Engstler, P2. Henning Laskowski, yesterday's winner, P3. Acceptable, but not where he would like it to be.
You're right.
Philip Pratt, James Owen, Mohamed Hamdi had a very good race, almost made it to the podium yesterday, was beaten by 1 position in P4.
Let me interrupt you if I may, because Ludovica is standing by to give us some news, apparently, of an opinion of Max Mugelli, Ludo.
Yes, Dave, I want to give you an update about Max Mugelli. Yesterday, he finished the race in the 3rd position, and in this moment is in the 11th position. But I told with Claudio of Eureka Competition, the team of Max Mugelli, and he said that Max has a little confidence in this condition, in wet condition, because it's the first time that he drive in this condition under the rain. But the teams hopes that in the race of today to don't lose a very important point for the final ranking.
Thank you, Ludovica, very much. Now, where are we at now? With 6 minutes remaining, those out there out of position who are desperately trying to put themselves into a position that they would rather be in, the likes of this driver, Eliseo Dono, who improves 2 places now and goes up to P4. Adrian Sutil has improved. He's now gone P2. So we're seeing times come down a little bit now, and I think that's as a consequence of some of that standing water being shifted away, Nico, just by dint of how many cars that are out there running now.
Absolutely, and I think all the drivers will be smart and approach this in a way where Eliseo Dono just put in a purple first sector to underscore the sentence I was about to utter. They will put their banker in, and then they will approach that level and limit of adhesion.
Yes.
So Eliseo Dono is proving exactly that. Purple first sector is only 2 100ths quicker than the current pole time, but it's exactly doing that and trying to push the envelope, if you will, as close as he can, and try and wrestle that pole position away from the Hungarian Benz Valent, who's currently residing in that P1. That extra point, and obviously the start position in the rain with the spray that we expect is...
That's critical. It's visibility, Nico, because if you're starting P1, it means you've got a clear track ahead of you. You've not got... You can see here, watching the Tom Fleming car, just how much spray is being kicked off the back of the 488 Challenge Evo. Now, if you're a car in P2, 3, or wherever you are on the grid, if you're not P1, you're going to be impacted and affected by that spray.
Exactly, and there is a good chance that the race might start behind the safety car, and that would mean single file start rather than side by side. And so immediately, even in P2, you're not on the front row anymore. So obviously, you always want to be as high up as you can, but in these visibility conditions, it's extra important that Eliseo O'Donnell stays where he is. So that first sector, he did improve a little bit in terms of time, but didn't count for too much, and that lap certainly looks like it's already might be compromised because of traffic before even reaching turn number 1. Max Mugelli currently in P5, as you can see, 2 personal bests through the first 2 sectors, and he is approaching the final turn, trying to climb the order. P6 overall for the moment. He has got quite a gap towards the P4 driver, Eliseo O'Donnell. Let's see if he can make something happen. A little bit of an improvement in terms of time, but not in terms of positions, and is then being vaulted by Simon Labniak, who inherits P5. Benz Welland, first sector, again, very good. The problem that you have here in Sector 3, with where Sector 1 and Sector 2 include the long straight, Sector 3 is where you have most of the narrow turns, so this is obviously where additional standing water will compromise your possible lap times the most, because grip level is just not there.
A very good point that you make, as are so many. We have 3 minutes remaining. It's Benz Welland from Adrian Sutil, from Tom Fleming, from Eliseo O'Donnell. For the AM drivers, it's David Gosner, who parked the car before the suspension, ahead of Franz Hengster and Hanno Laskowski. Hanno Laskowski, of course, yesterday's race winner. We're on board with Adrian Sutil, who's trying to improve and bank that additional point you get for pole position if he possibly can. But he's a bit down on what Benz Welland has delivered. It's a 1:40.092. I very boldly suggested earlier on in our broadcast that maybe we would see a time into the 1:39s. I think had the session not been suspended, maybe we would have got there. I think that might be a little bit of a taller order now, as Adrian Sutil does not improve. In fact, Sector 2 and Sector 3 were not to his liking at all. We have 2 drivers in the 140s, and they are Benz Welland and Adrian Sutil, the very driver that you are looking at right now. And just look, as you go through the gearbox on the 488 Challenge Evo, how it really impacts you in the driver's seat there, kicks you back into the seat, the wonderful power of these 488 Challenge Evos. He's running past the kink, which is turn number 2, before braking for turn number 3 as we go back to Benz Welland now, who is steadily trying to improve, but the sector times just aren't there at the moment. His 1:40.092 is not looking at the moment like it is going to be bettered, Nico.
Well, I will go out on a limb and say that we will see that time. I will make the adventurous call. We'll see the 1:39 something fall. We can see some very good sector times. Eliseo O'Donnell, first sector again, just 3/100ths off the pace. So it's difficult to get it consistent, but I do think 1 or 2 of the drivers will push the envelope on their final attempt, and one of them will come through and put it into the 1:39s. You heard it here first, and please forget it if it doesn't come true. Benz Welland is not going to do it on this occasion, I think. We think. Oh, but wasn't that far off, so we'll see. Eliseo O'Donnell is the man who might do it, and he probably would he benefit the most? Everybody would benefit the most. He's the one who's currently out of position in P4.
Short-cutting that turn a little bit, almost putting the wheels onto the grass there, but at the moment, Nico, he's going to get another lap, but it is going to be his last lap, so it's now or never to get into that trajectory of 1:39 that you so boldly ventured that we would achieve. I'm not convinced.
Well, he was P2 for a brief moment before this man, Adrian Sutil, snatched the P2 away from him once again. I think this attempt from Sutil, from Dono, they will both go all out, or all in, or whatever they will go and try and get it. And I dare say the first sector from either of them is not promising to prove me right. So, please erase that earlier sentence. No, we're not quite there. It is coming down. The clock is hitting quadruple zeros right now. So also officially, anybody who crosses the timing line, that's it for this qualifying session. I dare say probably the 140 will be more resilient than I anticipated. And I think Benz Welland is on the way to pole position. Adrian Sutil looks like he's set in P2. Eliseo O'Donnell maybe still doing something about a front row start or a P2 start, but not quite there. We will see the second sector probably not. In the M's, David Gosner, good strategy, his call. He's still in P1 in class. Franz Engstler P2, Henno Laskowski P3, and none of them on a trajectory to still improve. And with Eliseo Dono and Adrian Sutil, they're still both gonna take the checkered flag on this time, and that means there is still a chance for an improvement, but it's probably not gonna be enough to trouble Benz Valent. Eliseo Dono takes the timing line, stays P3. Adrian Sutil stays P2. And I think that those were the last challenges to the 1:39 time.
Yeah, I just think, honestly, I think we ran out of time. I think had we not seen that session suspended, then we would have been into the 39s. But, we've got the Mohammed Hamdi car parked up on the start-finish straight, Nico. So whether there's a problem for the number 37 car, the Ez Al Arab Automotive Company, Mohammed Hamdi then stuck on the home straight. Now, that ordinarily would have stopped the session, but of course the session is over now anyway. Andreas Berg Sorensen, Nico, had a real brave moment here, and that's at turn 3, and he makes contact with the tyres and just reshapes the back of his 488 Challenge Evo a little bit. Out of the car is Tom Fleming. It's a second row start for him, P4. And he goes back into the FF Corsa garage, and we'll take a look at the data from everyone else as well. And the rain is still coming down significantly, so the session is done. And we have pole position for Benz Valent for Trofeo Pirelli. For Pirelli Am, it is going to be David Gosner, who parked the car in the garage much, much earlier in the session. It proved a wise and a wonderful thing for him to do. So a very good pole position for David Gosner, who's shown extraordinary speed on occasions. And there you can see Andreas Berg Sorensen walking away from his car. Just being called out at turn number 3, Nico, where you're running uphill and you're going uphill and turning at the same time, and when grip is at a premium, there's some work to do for the Formula Racing team to put that car into shape. It's not huge damage, but they will be able to do that ahead of the race. I want to shout out to Simon Ladniak, who qualified really, really well. He goes from P5. Well done, Simon. Beginning to see some of the talent that we know you have. Here's confirmation of the result then from our qualifying session with Benz Valent, Adrian Sutil, Eliseo Dono, the top 3 of the Trofeo Pirelli drivers. Top 3 Pirelli Ham drivers, David Gosner, Danilo Del Favaro, just beating Franz Engstler. They are the top 3, and of course Hanno Laskowski, who was yesterday's race winner. He will be going from P4 in class, but he's 10th overall in terms of the Ferrari Challenge Trofeo Pirelli qualifying that we've enjoyed. So that's it. The session is done and dusted for Trofeo Pirelli in difficult conditions. Well done to all the drivers for mostly keeping it in between the white lines and pointing in the right direction in somewhat treacherous tarmac, or on somewhat treacherous tarmac. They managed to do that, and really, really impressive it was as well. So Trofeo Pirelli qualifying done. But of course, the Copa Shell drivers have got to go out for their truncated qualifying session, if you will, because it's split into 2. Here is Eliseo Dono then coming into the Parc Fermé area. And Eliseo Dono then very, very unusually starting from the second row of the grid. Quite clearly, he was one of those that got caught out by the red flag when it came. And that's the reason sometimes it pays to put in a banker early on, because you just don't know what's going to happen. The drama unfolds as Adrian Sutil also gets out of his 488 Challenge Evo. He'll be relatively happy with his qualifying pace, putting the car in P2, some 7/10ths down on Benz Valent, but it's worth remembering that that time of 1:40.092 from Benz Valent came much, much earlier in the session.
So what we will do before we go to our Copa Shell M qualifying in a few minutes, we will soon have a look at the highlights from the race yesterday, which was really, really impressive. And already there you go. This is the highlights from Coppa Shell yesterday, and you can see that race was held in the wet already, very much akin to the conditions here. And there was the move by Ernst Kirchmeier against Axel Sartingen, our championship leader, and Alexander Nussbaumer led the race early on. It was an intense battle, even in not ideal conditions, but it offered some amazing racing, as we can see. And there was the move for the race lead coming into turn 4. Ernst Kirchmeier on the inside, the all-Austrian battle against Alexander Nussbaumer. Just a little bit of a touch and a little bit of body work coming off the car, and that was one battle that we cherished and watched for the majority of the race. Christian Kinch against von Skeltemer, both of them fair, intense fighting, and some hard-stopping moment, including this one. Very, very good and intense racing. A little bit unfortunate more here, John Dillon against Thomas Goester, which sent both of them off the track and got a penalty for Dillon. Ernst Kirchmeier took the win on home soil for Baron Motorsport, Baron Racing. He got the win. In the AMS, it was Motohiro Isozaki who took the first win, his first win of the season, our Japanese entry to the European Challenge, and he was a great performance from him, congratulated by Eliseo Dono, and I mean, just amazing. And you can see how happy he was, and we got him to give us a little bit of